What if I told you that lighting up just one cigarette, or even taking a single puff of something you thought was harmless, could set off a chain reaction in your body that might one day steal your breath and your life? For decades, people have convinced themselves that smoking cigars, marijuana, or vaping is somehow safer than cigarettes. But here's the shocking truth. None of them are safe. Lung cancer has already killed more people than breast, colon, and prostate cancer combined, and 90% of those deaths could have been prevented. Imagine that. Nearly all of it was avoidable. Yet millions continue to inhale toxins every single day, believing they'll somehow be the lucky exception. But luck is not protection. Genetics is not immunity. And what you don't know about what's happening inside your lungs might terrify you. Welcome to the Wellness Way, where today I'm going to break down the raw reality of smoking, why any kind of smoke can scar your lungs, damage your body far beyond your chest, and silently steal years of your life. If you're ready to face the uncomfortable truth and finally see what smoking really does, stick with me until the end of this video. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button to support the Wellness Way so we can keep bringing you more eye-opening content that could change your health and maybe even save your life. It's strange how often we hold on to myths that make us feel safe, even when the evidence is screaming at us to wake up. I can't count the number of times I've heard someone proudly say, "My grandfather smoked every day of his life and lived to be 95. It sounds impressive, almost reassuring, like smoking can't really be that dangerous if someone managed to live that long while doing it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Those rare cases are the exception, not the rule. They are statistical outliers, lucky anomalies in a world where the overwhelming reality is the opposite. The real story is this. Lung cancer has quietly become one of the deadliest killers on the planet. In 1953, it overtook every other form of cancer to become the leading cause of cancer deaths in men. By 1985, it had climbed to the top for women too. Today, it kills 50% more women than breast cancer, a disease most people already fear deeply. And in 2020 alone, 1.8 million people worldwide lost their lives to lung cancer. Let that number sink in for a moment. 1.8 million. That's not just a statistic, it's families shattered, dreams cut short, lives stolen. What makes this even more tragic is that nearly 90% of those deaths could have been avoided. That's right, 9 out of 10 people who died from lung cancer didn't have to. The root cause wasn't some mysterious genetic curse or bad luck. It was smoking. Cigarettes, cigars, pipes, marijuana, vaping. It doesn't matter what form the smoke comes in. The damage, sooner or later, finds its way into the delicate tissue of the lungs. I remember the first time I saw the difference between healthy lungs and the lungs of a smoker. Healthy lungs are astonishingly beautiful when you think about what they do for us. They're light pink, spongy and elastic, built to expand and contract thousands of times a day without complaint. They are living proof of the body's resilience. But then you see the lungs of someone who smoked for years, and the contrast is like a punch in the gut. Blackened, stiff, scarred, often riddled with tumours. It's as if the lungs have been slowly suffocated from the inside out. And this is where the myth of the safe smoke falls apart. Some people convince themselves that if they avoid cigarettes and stick to cigars, or marijuana or vaping, they're somehow safe. But the truth is blunt. There is no safe form of smoking. Cigarettes are the worst offenders, responsible for about 90% of lung cancer cases. But cigars and pipes aren't innocent. They still deliver toxic chemicals deep into your lungs. Marijuana has been glamorized as natural or medicinal, yet studies show it causes changes in lung cells that look alarmingly similar to those seen in cigarette smokers right before cancer develops. And vaping, despite being marketed as the cleaner, safer option, is still a massive question mark. It hasn't been around long enough for us to measure the long-term effects, but early signs suggest it's far from harmless. Even secondhand smoke, yes, the stuff you breathe in just by being near a smoker, has the power to raise your cancer risk. Think about that for a second. You don't even have to be the one holding the cigarette for it to start hurting you. Families, children, co-workers, they all get pulled into the fallout. So why do people keep smoking? Why do so many ignore what seems obvious? Part of it is addiction. Nicotine is one of the most addictive substances on earth, and once it hooks you, it's like a chain around your body and mind. But another part of it is denial. It's easier to point to the rare 95-year-old smoker who got away with it than to face the millions who didn't. We tell ourselves comforting lies because the truth is terrifying. Here's the way I see it. Every puff is a gamble. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but somewhere down the line your lungs will show the bill. And unlike other risks we face in life, this one isn't random. It's chosen. That's what makes it so heartbreaking. What really shook me when I dove into the statistics was just how quickly smoking became a global epidemic. For centuries, tobacco was just another plant, chewed or smoked in small amounts. But once it became mass-produced, addictive, and marketed as glamorous, it spread like wildfire. By the mid-20th century, it had already claimed its place as the leading cause of preventable death, and the numbers haven't slowed down since. Think about that phrase, preventable death. We can't stop every car crash. We can't erase every genetic disease. But we can stop this. We can prevent millions of deaths simply by choosing not to inhale smoke into our lungs. And yet, year after year, millions don't stop. That contradiction is part of what makes this story so tragic. When I think back to those healthy pink lungs and compare them with the diseased, blackened lungs of a smoker, I can't shake the image. It's more than just science, it's a metaphor. One lung represents life, vitality, the possibility of breathing freely into old age. The other represents slow suffocation, a life cut short, and a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous habits are the ones we normalize. So the question I keep coming back to is this: are we willing to face the truth, or will we keep hiding behind myths and exceptions? Because the numbers don't lie, the autopsies don't lie, and the families who've buried loved ones far too soon certainly don't lie. In the end, it doesn't matter how many people brag about beating the odds. Smoking isn't a game of luck. It's a loaded dice that almost always rolls the same way. And if you keep rolling long enough, the outcome is inevitable. The first time I ever saw human lungs up close, I felt something shift inside me. On one table was a set of healthy lungs, light pink and soft, almost like a sponge filled with life. They looked elastic, designed to expand and collapse thousands of times a day without breaking down. On another table were the lungs of someone who smoked for decades. The difference was so shocking it almost didn't feel real. Black patches spread across the surface. Parts of the tissue were stiff and scarred, and there were hard nodules that hinted at tumours growing within. It wasn't just the sight of disease, it was the visible evidence of years of slow destruction. That image has never left me, because it told a story words alone couldn't. It showed me what smoke really does inside the body, and it made me question something I'd heard countless times. Not all forms of smoking are equally dangerous. Cigars are safer, Marijuana is natural. Vaping isn't really smoking. These excuses float around everywhere, comforting people into thinking they can outsmart biology. But when I looked at those diseased lungs, I realized something simple and brutal. There is no safe smoke. Let's break it down. Cigarettes are, without a doubt, the biggest killers. They account for about 90% of all lung cancer cases. The danger doesn't just come from nicotine, but from the cocktail of chemicals in every puff. Tar, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, and dozens of other toxic compounds. Over time, those chemicals inflame the airways, damage the delicate cells lining the lungs, and trigger mutations that can lead to cancer. The more you smoke, the higher the risk climbs, and there's no magic number of safe cigarettes a day. Now, some people turn to cigars or pipes, convincing themselves it's less harmful. And yes, statistically, the risk from cigars may be slightly lower than cigarettes, but slightly lower still means significantly higher than not smoking at all. Cigar smoke is still loaded with carcinogens, and inhaling it, whether deliberately or secondhand, still damages the lungs. Then there's marijuana. This one is tricky because it carries a different cultural weight. It's often labelled as medicinal or natural, and that label tricks people into thinking it's harmless. But studies show otherwise. When scientists examined the lung cells of marijuana smokers, they found changes that looked eerily similar to the precancerous changes in cigarette smokers. The risk hasn't been fully measured yet, but the pattern is there. To me, that's like seeing storm clouds gathering on the horizon. It would be foolish to pretend it's a sunny day. And what about vaping? It's the newest player on the field, marketed as a cleaner, safer alternative. The problem is we don't have decades of data yet to understand the long-term damage. But here's what we do know. Vaping still delivers nicotine, still exposes the lungs to foreign chemicals, and still causes inflammation. In fact, doctors are already seeing young patients with lung injuries directly tied to vaping. It might look sleeker and smell less offensive than cigarettes, but that doesn't make it safe. It just makes it a more deceptive trap. Even secondhand smoke carries its own dangers. If you've ever stood near someone smoking and felt your throat scratch or your eyes burn, that's your body reacting to toxins. Those same toxins slip into your lungs, even if you never touch a cigarette yourself. Children of smokers, spouses, co-workers, they all inhale the consequences without choosing them. And that's what makes secondhand smoke so cruel. It punishes the innocent. The irony is that many smokers believe they're in control. They think, I can quit any time, or 1 or 2 cigars won't hurt. But the lungs don't see it that way. The lungs don't negotiate. They don't care if the smoke came from a filtered cigarette, a joint, or a sleek little vape pen. They absorb the chemicals just the same, and they pay the price over time. One of the most striking things I've learned is how smoke changes the very texture of lung tissue. Healthy lungs are soft, pliable, almost bouncy. They need that elasticity to breathe efficiently. Smoking, however, gradually stiffens them. Tar builds up, scar tissue forms, and the lungs lose their flexibility. That's why smokers often feel short of breath even walking up a flight of stairs. It's not just the cancer risk, it's the daily suffocation that comes from damaged lungs. And let's not forget about chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. It's a slow, devastating condition that traps air in the lungs, making every breath feel like drowning. Many smokers who don't die from cancer end up living with COPD, chained to oxygen tanks, unable to walk across a room without gasping. If you've ever seen someone struggling to breathe like that, you know it's not a life anyone would choose voluntarily. I sometimes wonder if people would think differently about smoking if they could see their own lungs in real time. Imagine lighting up a cigarette and then watching the smoke stain your tissue black, watching healthy pink flesh harden into scarred grey patches. Would it still feel worth it? Or would that image finally break through the illusions we wrap around smoking? Because at the heart of it, the biggest lie is the idea that smoking is a matter of preference, a harmless lifestyle choice. The truth is that smoking doesn't just affect the smoker. It affects families who breathe in the secondhand smoke. It affects children who grow up with higher risks of asthma and infections. It affects healthcare systems that spend billions treating preventable diseases. Every puff sends ripples far beyond the person holding the lighter. For me, the turning point came when I realized how much denial plays into this. We cling to the safe narratives: cigars are fine, marijuana is natural, vaping is cleaner, because they allow us to keep doing what we want without guilt. But denial doesn't change biology. Lungs don't know the difference between traditional smoke and modern smoke. They only know injury. And that's the story those two sets of lungs told me. One was a picture of resilience, built to carry life for decades. The other was a story of choices, addiction, and slow destruction. Side by side, they showed me the real price of believing in safe smoke. When we talk about smoking, most people immediately think of lung cancer. And yes, that is the biggest, loudest alarm bell. But here's what truly surprised me. The danger of smoking goes far beyond the lungs. Cigarettes are not just a lung problem. They are an everything problem. The smoke you inhale doesn't politely stay in your chest. It travels through your blood, reaching every organ, every cell, every system in your body. That's why quitting is not just about lowering your risk of lung cancer. It's about protecting your heart, your bones, your reproductive health, even your vision. It's about giving your entire body a chance to heal and breathe again. And the incredible thing is, the body really does respond when you stop. Within just a few weeks of quitting, circulation improves and lung function begins to recover. Within months, coughing and shortness of breath start to fade. Within years, the risk of heart attack drops, and after about 15 years, your chances of dying from lung cancer shrink by up to 90%. That's not a miracle. It's simply your body doing what it's designed to do. Repair itself once the constant assault of smoke finally stops. But let's be clear. Smoking damages far more than your lungs. For example, the heart. Cigarette smoke inflames the lining of blood vessels, making them sticky and prone to clots. It disrupts cholesterol, raising the bad and lowering the good. This is why smoking is a major contributor to heart disease and stroke. In fact, more than 10% of all deaths from cardiovascular disease are directly linked to smoking. That means for every 10 people who die from heart-related conditions, at least one of them likely could have been saved if cigarettes weren't part of the picture. Then there's the immune system. Smokers are more likely to catch infections like the flu, colds, and pneumonia because smoke weakens the body's defenses. It's like leaving your front door unlocked in a bad neighborhood. Viruses and bacteria get in more easily. And once they do, the body has a harder time fighting them off. Smoking also affects metabolism and blood sugar. Nicotine can interfere with insulin sensitivity, which explains why smokers have a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes. This was one of the most surprising things I learned, because most people never connect smoking with diabetes. But the evidence is clear. The habit literally rewires how the body handles sugar, and it doesn't stop there. Smoking steals from your bones, accelerating osteoporosis and making fractures more likely. It reduces blood flow to the skeletal system, slows the production of bone-building cells and decreases calcium absorption. That means smokers not only risk cancer and heart disease, they risk breaking a hip or spine and losing mobility in later years. When it comes to reproductive health, the list of harms is just as alarming. In women, smoking increases the risk of infertility, complications during pregnancy, and even early menopause. In men, it's linked to reduced sperm count and erectile dysfunction. That last one might make some people laugh uncomfortably, but it's no joke. When blood flow is damaged by smoking, it doesn't just threaten the heart, it affects every part of the body that depends on circulation. Even the eyes aren't spared. Smoking raises the risk of cataracts and macular degeneration, two leading causes of blindness. Imagine not being able to see your family clearly, not because of age alone, but because of a habit that could have been left behind years ago. The mouth and teeth tell another part of the story. Smokers are more prone to gum disease, ulcers, and tooth loss. The same smoke that turns lung tissue black also leaves its mark on your smile. And beyond the cosmetic impact, gum disease has been linked to heart problems as well, creating another hidden pathway between smoking and overall decline. The harsh truth is that up to half of all smokers will die from a tobacco-related illness. Half. That means every time someone lights up, the odds are essentially a coin flip on whether it will eventually take their life. To me, that's not a gamble worth playing. And yet, here's the most hopeful part of the story. Quitting works. Even after decades of smoking, the body shows remarkable resilience. Former smokers who stay smoke-free for 15 years reduce their risks so dramatically that their health outcomes begin to resemble those of people who never smoked at all. It's as if the body says, "Thank you. Now let me do the repair work I've been waiting to do." Whenever I hear the argument, "But my uncle smoked for 60 years and lived to 100, I remind myself and others that these cases are rare outliers. They lived long in spite of smoking, not because of it. For every one of those stories, there are millions more of people whose lives were cut short, whose families grieved earlier than they should have, all because of a habit that didn't need to exist. So the real question isn't whether smoking is dangerous. That part is settled. The real question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Because once you've seen the truth, once you've understood that smoking attacks your lungs, your heart, your bones, your reproductive system, your eyes, and your immune defenses, you can't unsee it. The choice becomes clear. Keep gambling with your life, or take back control. And if you're thinking about quitting, remember this. It's never too late. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. It doesn't matter. The benefits start the moment you put out your last cigarette and don't pick up another. You don't need to be perfect, and you don't need to do it alone. Millions of people have walked this road before, and millions more will follow. The important thing is to take the first step. So I leave you with this thought. Every breath you take is a gift. Your lungs, your heart, your body, they're fighting for you every day, even when you make choices that hurt them. The least we can do is fight for them in return. When I look back at everything I've learned and shared about smoking, one thought stands out above all. This is a battle we don't have to lose. Lung cancer, heart disease, bone loss, infertility. These are not mysterious fates written in stone. They are consequences of choices, and that means we have the power to change them. For me, the most powerful moment was seeing the contrast between healthy lungs and the lungs of a smoker. That image told the story more clearly than any statistic could. On one side, a vibrant, elastic organ built to keep us alive for decades. On the other, a blackened, stiff and broken structure that had been suffocated by years of smoke. It was more than just anatomy. It was a reflection of two different futures. The lesson I take from this is simple but profound. Every choice counts. We often think of smoking as something distant. Maybe it will hurt me someday. But the truth is, it chips away at health every single day, in ways both visible and invisible, and quitting, no matter how late it may feel, is always worth it. I've seen too many examples of the body's resilience not to believe in its ability to heal. I also think about how smoking doesn't just affect the individual. It touches families, children, friends, and even strangers who breathe in secondhand smoke. That's why this isn't just a personal issue, it's a collective one. When one person quits, the benefits ripple outward, protecting loved ones and lightening the burden on everyone around them. If there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's that you don't have to be trapped by the myth of smoking. You don't have to believe in the lie of safe smoke, or hide behind stories of rare exceptions who lived long despite their habits. The evidence is clear, the consequences are real, and the choice is in your hands. My personal belief is that we owe it to ourselves and to the people who care about us to fight for health while we still can. No cigarette, no cigar, no joint, no vape is worth the years it steals. And the moment you decide to quit, you give yourself a second chance at life, one that's longer, healthier, and more fulfilling. So I'll leave you with this question. If you knew that every cigarette could take away a piece of your future, would you still light it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share your perspective in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to take that first step toward quitting. And if you found value in this video, don't forget to subscribe to The Wellness Way. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating content that matters, content that can change lives, and maybe even save them.